Take a look at this post on X. It was written by Khalaf Al-Abtar, an Emirati billionaire, on March 5, 2026, days after the start of American and Israeli strikes on Iran. In a direct address to the US president, it reads, "Who gave you the authority to drag our region into a war with Iran?" That post was later deleted.
The United Arab Emirates says it has intercepted 3 missiles now fired from Iran.
The UAE was the most heavily targeted Gulf state during the Iran war, intercepting nearly 3,000 missiles and drones and suffering strikes on airports, critical infrastructure, and civilian targets.
They had abundance of drones that they could use to target the US by targeting the GCC country.
Iran has framed these strikes as retaliation against US assets in the region. The conflict also put pressure on parts of the UAE's economy. By the end of March, the country's 2 primary national stock exchanges had lost around $120 billion in value since the start of the war.
The FTSE in the Dubai UAE index, that is down 4.3%.
In April 2026, the IMF revised down its growth forecast for Gulf economies, citing the war. The UAE was still expected to grow, but its 2026 forecast was cut from 5% to 3.1%. Based on the UAE's 2025 GDP, that is equivalent to roughly $11 billion in lower projected economic output.
This is Iran's way of trying to incentivize, if not bluntly scare, places like the UAE into pressuring, I think, President Trump into either stopping the strikes or ending things sooner.
Given the economic fallout and the uncertainty the conflict created for one of the region's most important business hubs, you might expect its relationship with the US to have come under strain. But the opposite happened.
Abu Dhabi has remained firmly aligned with the United States.
So, as recent deals point towards the UAE and the US strengthening their ties, what does this deeper partnership mean for defense, investment, and power in the Gulf? To understand why the UAE and the US are moving closer, you have to look at several parts of the relationship, and the first one is defense.
The war has dramatically accelerated US-UAE defense cooperation. US-UAE defense ties go way back to the founding of the Emirates, with diplomatic relations established in the 1970s. They deepened significantly after the Gulf War, after which the US led coalition's campaign to end the Iraqi occupation of Kuwait.
It was during that period that the UAE granted the US access to Al Dhafra Air Base, a critical hub for American operations in the region.
The UAE has also fought alongside the US from Afghanistan to Yemen, earning the nickname Little Sparta. Today, UAE ports host more US Navy ships than any port outside the United States.
In 2024, the White House designated the UAE as a major defense partner of the United States, a status previously granted only to India. The designation is designed to deepen military cooperation through joint training, exercises, and military-to-military collaboration. Between 1950 and 2023, the US sold more than $33.8 billion in military equipment to the UAE. From 2016 to 2025, more than $11.3 billion in defense articles were exported from the US to the UAE through direct commercial sales. But since the start of the Iran war, arms sales have accelerated sharply. Between February and May 2026, the US approved or fast-tracked more than $15 billion in potential defense deals for the UAE, equal to nearly half the value of US military equipment the UAE bought between 1950 and 2023.
For the UAE, the US provides a critical security umbrella. It also gives Abu Dhabi access to the world's most advanced military technologies, helping it pursue ambitious national goals and maintain a strategic edge, even over regional competitors like Saudi Arabia.
A lot of the capacity building that helped us fend those attacks came from the US. That is not going to go away. And I don't think the Iranian pressure on the UAE relationship with Israel has made it less. Actually, we've seen the Iron Dome deployed. This was not deployed before the war, it deployed after the war.
The UAE is one of Israel's closest Arab partners. It hosts critical US military assets and it's geographically exposed. Add to that the concentration of American companies in Dubai, and the UAE became both a symbolic and a strategic target for Tehran.
Signed in 2020, the Abraham Accords brought the UAE closer to Israel, one of Washington's key allies in the region. That added another layer to the UAE's defense relationship with the US, linking Abu Dhabi more directly to America's regional security network.
It's not a one-way relationship. For Washington, the UAE is one of its most reliable defense partners in the Gulf, key to projecting power, securing critical shipping lanes. The UAE and the US share the same view on Iran's proxies, which is that it must not be allowed to continue destabilizing the Middle East. Ultimately, it's a mutually reinforcing partnership. The UAE gains protection and technology, while the US gains a capable ally and a strategic foothold in a vital region.
We've seen a lot of drones being thwarted through systems that were done and developed here in the UAE. We've also had other partnerships that were developed over years. Korea is one, Italy is one, and it's also developing. France is one. This is a capacity started with the US, but I don't think it stopped there. It just taught us how to work with others better.
Going forward, I'm really watching for whether the UAE and other Gulf countries really step up their build defense capacity at home. We've seen the UAE launch a defense trade zone and really encouraging investments and partnering, yes, with US firms, but also with Ukrainian firms. Linked into this has also been UAE greater investments in AI, not only related to defense, but this is a really important national security area. If anything, in the context of this conflict, that priority is only going to continue.
Defense is only one part of the UAE-U.S. relationship. For years, the two countries have been deepening their economic ties through trade, investment, and increasingly, technology. The UAE is one of Washington's key economic partners in the Gulf. In 2024, U.S. foreign direct investment in the UAE stood at around $15 billion. But UAE foreign direct investment in the US was more than twice as large, at about $35 billion.
Economic ties between the US and the UAE also deepened significantly under President Donald Trump. Bilateral trade reached a record almost $39 billion in 2025.
But trade is only part of the story. China and India are larger trade partners for the UAE by value. Where the US relationship stands out is capital, from sovereign wealth and portfolio exposure to long-term strategic commitments.
UAE investments in the United States exceed $1 trillion, spanning sectors like infrastructure, technology, energy, and manufacturing. We're also seeing growth in capital markets, from sovereign investments into US assets to private credit and infrastructure.
Some of that is in just US equities and US corporate bonds, but there's a sizable concentration in the energy sector, including in liquefied natural gas projects. The UAE obviously is a major energy power of its own right at home. It's also invested in both oil and gas, but also renewable energy projects in the United States. I just see this as being about the need of additional power sources in this AI-driven world.
We were doing a table of all the capital committed by sovereign wealth funds into the big three AI companies. So SpaceX, including xAI, Anthropic, and OpenAI. And the reality is that most of the sovereign wealth funds that have committed capital to these companies are coming from the Middle East.
In 2025, the UAE committed to a 10-year, $1.4 trillion investment framework in the US focused on energy, manufacturing, semiconductors, and AI infrastructure.
The incremental investment pledges look a little optimistic to me. This is a reflection not just of a security relationship, but the depth of US capital market and innovation.
It positions the UAE as one of the largest foreign investors in the United States. More importantly, it marks a shift in the relationship from oil and security to a strategic partnership built on capital and technology.
These are investments that are focused on having an economic return, but are linked to domestic economic development.
People have always looked at that long-term relationship as being based on what is called the Quincy Agreement. The idea was that US would provide security and Saudi Arabia and the whole of the GCC sell oil in dollars. And I think we are at a point where we need a Quincy 2. In Quincy 2, it's not going to be oil that is going to be the major commodity. It will be AI.
The UAE in wanting to double down on AI development and the knowledge economy has chosen the US as the strategic partner there, to the extent of cutting ties in some data centers with Chinese companies. Abu Dhabi's plan is to not only develop best-in-class AI tech stack domestically, but also to export that to African countries, to South Asia. And so for G42, in order to access the highest level chips designed by NVIDIA, they had to promise to not use Huawei or other Chinese technology.
And the war in Iran has not stopped these investments. In March 2026, UAE ambassador to the US, Youssef Al-Otaiba, said the country would stand by its planned and existing investment pledges in the US.
Geopolitical shocks don't change the direction. If anything, they reinforce the need for economic diversification and technological strength.
US companies, all of them were very quick at the start of the conflict to express their commitment to the UAE, but there will be questions depending on how this new normal develops, but also whether there is a risk of recurrence.
There's also a security logic. Deepening investment ties with the US helps anchor the UAE within Washington's economic and strategic orbit. Avoiding decoupling is very much an underlying goal.
In April 2026, the UAE made an unusual request. It asked the US about a possible financial backstop.
Many of our Gulf allies have requested swap lines. The swap line would both benefit the UAE and the US.
A currency swap line allows foreign central banks to access US dollars in times of market stress. In practice, the UAE Central Bank could exchange Emirati dirhams for dollars from the Federal Reserve, then provide those dollars to local banks if funding markets came under pressure. Later, the currencies would be swapped back.
This is a country with some major pools of capital. Why would they be needing a swap line? I see the UAE's request for a swap line as being part of signaling their commitment to the US, the desire for almost the seal of approval that their policies were good, and I think also a bit of a point of leverage there.
They need liquidity. So for the UAE, the goal is clear. Secure access to the world's reserve currency, the US dollar, and strengthen ties with Washington. For the US, it serves a broader objective, maintaining the dominance of the dollar by keeping key partners like the UAE firmly within its financial orbit.
In the short term, yes, the UAE has gotten closer to the US, closer to Israel, but this really depends on how this war really ends and what sort of new normal develops in the region.